and welcome to Cycling Weekly's 2019 Giro d'Italia race preview. My name's Paul Knott and I'm joined by former pro rider and founder of Knott and Yanto Barker. And this race, I'm looking forward to it. I've got my Grand Tour shirt on as always. Absolutely loaded field. This is going to be a good race, isn't it?
It's always a good race, yeah, absolutely. Can it be as exciting as last year? I hope so.
Yeah.
It's got the riders in it,
yeah.
And I'm sure it'll have the competition, so it's going to be exciting to see.
Definitely. So just to break it down into numbers for our viewers. So 21 stages, 3,518 kilometres, 58.2 of which are against the clock in time trials, the most of any Grand Tour this year. It's almost entirely in Italy, apart from a short section into San Marino. 3 individual time trials, no team time trials. The Grande part is in Bologna. We have 7 summit finishes before the finish in Verona. The general consensus of this race is all in the north of Italy, which, as you know, the north of Italy has a lot of mountains, and that is what the race is known for.
Yeah, not just mountains. The Dolomites and northern Italian mountain ranges are just quite a difficult set of roads to ride up and down.
Yeah.
They're quite bumpy, they're not always perfect surfaces, they're quite aggressive gradients, they're not smooth and even like you get in the Alps where big wide roads are nice smoothly tarmacked. The Alps are just a little bit less easy to get a rhythm.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we've pointed out about 7 key stages we think are going to be real tests for the GC hopefuls. Starting off in Bologna at the Grande part with an 8.2 kilometre individual time trial. But it has a bit of it's not your bog standard prologue. It has a bit of a sting in the tail with a climb right at the end. I think the general GC contenders are going to be going for the win here.
I do. I think it's going to be a mini little selection. 8.2 kilometres. They've got to be on it. There's a weird thing now happening because there'll be a whole set of hierarchy set in the finishing positions of this first time trial. Yeah. And then there's almost 12 stages until the next time there's going to be a proper selection. Then it's just going to be avoided crashes for the week before while the sprinters have a go. That's quite a long time. And then obviously some of the hardest parts that we'll come up to, but some of the hardest parts of the race are right up to like stage 20 and the final stage was the time trial. So there's a lot of form to manage across the whole 3 weeks. Yeah,
exactly. And we saw this last year. Tom Dumoulin took pink on stage 1 in Israel, lost it the next day, probably on purpose because he didn't want to carry that through the entire race. But this stage kind of looks tailor-made for him as well. So it's, like we said, 8 kilometres long. The first 6 kilometres pretty much pan flat, and then there's a 2 kilometre climb at the end, averages 9.7%, but has stretches that ramp up to 10 to 12%. Yeah, the big names, Dumoulin, Roglic.
Yeah, everyone's going to want to test their form. That's the first thing. It's easier to defend a position than it is to attack it and get it back again. So obviously, wherever you finish, then your team sets out to look after you and retain that at a minimum, if not move up a little bit in the coming stages. So you can't go into this without 100% full commitment.
No, exactly. And we saw last year, Chris Froome fell off whilst reconning the stage, which almost looked like at the end of the race for him. And I'm sure there was a few investors who got him to the race who were holding their breath as well. And so yeah, you've got to be flying, but you've got to also take it within reason.
Yeah. Obviously, you can't win the race on the first stage, but you can definitely lose time and make it a lot harder to win it for yourself. But definitely you've got to look at it 3 weeks at a time. You can't lose any time, but equally you can't go taking out all the risks and risk falling off or whatever. That's just not going to work either. They've got to be a sensible approach to it.
No, definitely. So moving on to the next key stage for the GC hopefuls is stage 9. That's quite a big jump. In between those two, we've got a lot of flat stages, a few lumpy stages, but that is where the sprinters will rack up the majority of their wins. Obviously, there's no easy day, but this is going to be the next key day, and it's another individual time trial. This time a bit longer, 34.7, but it's kind of just an extended one of that first stage. It finishes with a climb once again.
Yeah, classic Italians, they just like to throw it up in the air. So for instance, the time trial specialists don't quite get the same runners here, who are a bit heavier, a bit bigger, and can obviously push out more watts. But then as soon as you start going uphill, power to weight ratio matters so much, and it suddenly brings it back towards a Roglic or a Dumoulin or any of the other GC guys who are on good form and are clearly climbing well as well, who want to be going for the overall victory. So the time trialists will be actually a little bit frustrated with that.
Yeah, you're not going to be too pleased, but this isn't the only opportunity as well in the race, but that is the general theme of these time trials. But yeah, this one in particular, it's 12.12 kilometre climb and averages 4.5%, but it regularly hovers around 7% for long chunks of it. And it's the only time the race leaves Italy this year, just dipping into San Marino. But yeah, and then they go into the rest day straight after that. So they're going to be going all out to try and get some time, and especially Dumoulin and Roglic against potential climbing specialists who, even though they're not bad climbers themselves, but they're going to want to get some time in the bank.
Absolutely. The good time trialists need to make sure they make the most of the time trialing stages. Likewise, the mountain specialists, they've got to keep it within touching distance, because it's kind of almost easier to get the time in the time trial because there's no one around you, there's no slipstream, there's no psychological holding on effect, whereas obviously in the mountains they are savage, but all these guys are so strong, and the difference between, you know, the top 5 guys is probably only, you know, a few percent, so we really have to work hard to get 10 seconds, 15 seconds on the road stages. Definitely.
And then next key stage, stage 13, which by this point, if you're a sprinter and you've got a few wins, you're probably going to go home here, because it gets hard from here on in, and you're not going to want to slog your way around these mountains, because this is where the race really kicks off. So stage 13 from Pinarello, 188k, and with a summit finish up Cerro Riel, which is
2,247 metres is significant, I would say. As soon as you start going over 15 to 1,800 metres, that is very thin air. It's a different exercise to what we're all used to down at sea level, and the gaps get bigger very quickly. That is something to recognise. Yeah,
and this final climb, so it's totals just over 20k, and the average is just under 6%, which doesn't seem too, well, for me, that sounds horrendous. But if you look in depth, the last 6k are just under 9%, which...
It's the irregularity of the gradient that makes it so difficult. Like you say, there's even a plateau, and
in the middle,
to make up that 6% back again, 6k's at 9% is significant. You're going to notice. No,
exactly. And then the next day we have another brutal stage, but it's 131k, which is...
Yeah, don't be fooled by these shorter stages. Often attacked harder, less controlling phase. So the way a Grand Tour stage usually goes is there's an attacking phase where the guys who want to get in the break go. Then there's a holding phase in the middle, and then there's the sort of finale, which is at the end, 40k's, 50k's, depending on the type of terrain they're going over. When you take out sort of 50k's of a stage from 200 or 180 to 130, what you're basically doing is taking out the holding phase. So basically you've got the attacking phase at the beginning and the attacking phase at the end all joined together, and that makes it very difficult.
And like I said, if there's any sprinters here, they're going to absolutely hate today, because I'm just looking at this now. I reckon there's about a 14k flat bit, and you're going up or down the rest of the day. It's literally just a shark tooth. The final climb, it doesn't actually finish up a proper mountain finish, but the final climb is a 10.5 kilometre slog, about just under 10%. And that comes 30k from the finish line. So, I mean, we've seen Roglic win stages similar to this, like using his descending skills and that he may well have this marked. And
you've also seen Yates do something similar. There's a big descent afterwards, and then obviously an undulating rolling road to the finish. And once guys have been going over the climbs that they will have done here, and obviously stage 14 is a long way into the race itself, there isn't quite the teammates around, there isn't quite the same punch in the legs to close those gaps off the top of the climb, so actually holding it gets a little bit easier. If you've got the legs, you can keep it going all the way to the finish line.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to stage 16, so this is arguably the queen stage of the race. We've got the Cima Coppi in this one, the highest point of the race, going up the Passo Gavia, before they descend to the infamous Mortirolo, which is a brute, and especially when it's coming after the highest point of the race, it's going to crack people.
What is quite freaky about this is how it's dwarfed by the Passo di Gavia, but that's not to take anything away from the Mortirolo, because it's so steep, so consistent. There are no plateaus, no soft spots. It is just hard bottom to top, and we've seen the racing absolutely tear itself apart in previous editions of the Giro, and it's undoubtedly going to deliver something similar again. And anyone who's in a strong position, feeling a little bit weak, this will be the time when the guys who are trying to attack the race, maybe they're still pure climbers trying to get back lost time from the time trials, this is the time when they need to make that count. But there is still a descent and then a run into the finish. So plenty of racing to go from the top of the Mortirolo.
No, definitely. And let's break down the numbers. So the Passo Gavio is 16.5k, 8% average gradient, and yeah, rises to 2,618 meters. Like I said, the highest point in this year's race. And then they descend, a lightning quick descent into Bormio and along the valley to the base of the Mortirolo, which is 12.8k, averages just over 10%. It's a world of pain, and yeah, it's so claustrophobic. It's such a narrow road, and it's very interesting to see the gearing selected for this stage, because like there'll probably be some riders who have done this before and they know the Mortirolo. I mean, you would imagine they'd all be kind of clued up in a way, but that will catch you out. If you're not having a good day, you need to have that extra gear at the back.
Well, we saw, Team Sky last year use really, really small gears and just keep pedaling all the way up. It's old-fashioned now to see the guys lurching like this. They're either sprinters who are about to get eliminated and they've got no power left, or it's old footage and it's black and white.
No, exactly.
Everyone else nowadays is definitely pedal, use the heart and lungs.
Yeah. So moving on to the Queen stage of the Dolomites, stage 20. Stage 19 last year, where the race completely flipped in his head, and this is really the last opportunity if anyone was going to repeat Chris Froome's insane long-range attack up the finish last year. This may well be the stage that they decide to do it on. So we have over 5,000 meters of climbing, 4 climbs: the Cima Campo, the Passo Mangen, the Passo Roll, before finishing up Monte Avena, and it's got a similar kind of profile to the stage 19 last year. And yeah, I mean, we're probably unlikely going to see someone do a long range attack, but this is, if you're going to, it's now or never, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, it's a long time between the start of a stage race, the Grand Tour stage race, and the finish. And like I said earlier, the guys have to manage their form. They've got to come in with just the right amount of form to get a decent position in that first time trial. Then they've got to hold it across a bunch of flat stages and avoid the crashes. And then they've got to come into their absolute sweet spot in this last week, really. It's a little bit more than last week, it's more like 10 days, 8, 9 days. And that's really difficult to manage. So there are some people who might have got their form slightly wrong and really coming into it now, right towards the end, like we saw Chris Froome did. Yeah. And they've got to make the most of it. When they feel like they've got good legs, they've got to attack the race, and this is a perfect stage to do it. Take everyone by surprise. You haven't made your team work all week, defending that jersey, and you can take it off someone. And we've seen it before.
And we've seen it in the Giro in particular. We saw it with Nibali's the master of this, like looking like absolute hell in the first week, like, oh, he's gone, write him off, but do not write him off. Or any rider that may be looking a bit like undercooked in the first week.
As spectators, we want to see exciting racing right to the last minute. And I think the fact that you've got savage mountain stages right up to the end and then a time trial, hopefully, like when Dumoulin took the victory, there is something close and positions change. I mean, for us as spectators, we want to see that. For the riders themselves, they want to have a big gap, and they want to be assured that they can't lose it, because then they can relax. It's unlikely to happen. It's a very competitive race. There are a combination of different disciplines coming into that last few stages, and there's definitely an opportunity for some upsets to happen.
No, definitely. And yeah, you just mentioned the time trial there. That is how the race concludes into Verona, 15.6 kilometre individual time trial. On this one also has a lovely little climb in the middle of it.
So I was going to mention as well, the time trial specialists, they would be disappointed if there's big climbs or significant climbs in time trials, but doing a time trial like this at the end of a Grand Tour 3 weeks in is a very different exercise to doing it either as an individual time trial just by itself, or even a time trial within the first 4 or 5 days of a race. It's not like this. This is a whole different exercise.
Both mentally and physically as well.
Yeah, your body goes through some changes when it has to cover the kind of distances and altitude gains that the guys will have been through. And the fatigue levels are something that most lay people just couldn't even comprehend. And then trying to get out a max TT effort for 15Ks, which is not that long. That is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the ideal scenario, we'd have Bernal and Yates at the top two, Tom Dumoulin and Roglic maybe about, 40 seconds behind?
Yeah, something like
that. Into that. And that would just, and go race and see what happens. But, I mean, we've seen this year as well. Primož Roglic won Torino Adriatico by 1 second on the final time trial. That was pan flats, and this has got a climb in. And it's a bit technical from the descent on the way down. So the climb, basically all the 2 other time trials were like a ski ramp, just kind of went up to the finish. This one has a lump in the middle and descent into the finish, and if the Giro's on the line, people will be taking a lot of risks to try and snatch that jersey back. And yeah, it could be fantastic.
It will all come down to the time gaps leading into that last stage, and if they're close, it's worth taking a risk for.
Exactly, exactly. We've highlighted the key stages, but who are the riders that will be fighting for the pink jersey this year? We've named a few of them. The main one that I think we have to mention is Tom Dumoulin, who's second last year in the Giro and the Tour. And he's one of those riders who just slowly builds through the race and peaks at the right time.
I think he does. He's a very bright rider, both in the way he manages his racing leading up to his objectives and the way he manages his form and rides each race and each stage. He's a clever guy, and I think he'll be working every aspect of his assets to try and come away with a victory this time.
Yeah, of course. And he won in 2017 as well, and he's been arguably the best stage race of the last year. Just hasn't actually won a Grand Tour, which is unfortunate for him, but it's kind of the way it's been favouring both the Giro and the Tour. One of his main rivals, who's peaked this year quite early already, is Primož Roglic. Yeah,
it's interesting to see whether Roglic has been earlier in his form cycle or is just going better. That's the bit that we all have to decide between. He's clearly on great form because he's been winning races, and even though by small margins, winning is winning, but then that also brings a lot of attention. Yeah. So you get followed a bit more, you get a bit more pressure, you get a bit more press, you get a little bit more outside of the racing kind of expectation, and that's not always easy to support. No. So whether that will have enough of a difference against the other contenders, we'll have to see, but he's definitely been prominent so far early this season. Yeah, I think what's key for him as well, his team this year, and the back end of last year have just shown how strong they are. They've been challenging Sky on the climbs, and even though it's not a team time trial in this, they've been winning the team time trial, which just shows their strength and depth. Absolutely. Well-designed team for Grand Tour GC victories, and they definitely have strength and depth enough to defend a jersey when they get one. Yeah, definitely. And you can't say that about all these riders. Well, talking about riders defending pink jerseys, Simon Yates, it looked like last year I remember cycling, I saw a mock cover for Cycling Weekly with Simon Yates in pink jersey winning the race, and a bit premature, but it literally looked like he was about to take the Giro last year. He held it for 13 days, he won 3 stages, he looked invincible in a way, and then it got to the Thursday, I think, and there was some cracks just forming, and then he lost about 20 seconds, and then we had stage 17 where Froome ripped the race, and he was not even just spat out the back of the leaders, he was just spat out the back of the entire race. But he'll come back this year stronger. So, and they are a strong team, Mitchelton Scott shouldn't be underestimated. They have some really strong riders, and they have got the strength to defend a jersey, for a significant amount of time. So it's whether he's got the form, and like I said, he's a year older, he's a year stronger, and there'll be a few scars there that he'll want to show that he's got past, and he's made up for. I mean, he won the Vuelta later on in the year. It's not like he kind of banished those demons to an extent by taking a Grand Tour victory. Obviously, it's not the Giro. Yeah, but you never forget that kind of pain. Not just getting dropped from the next group and the next group. That's a whole different. Yeah, but he's looked solid this year as well. He's had a stage win in Ruta del Sol and Paris-Nice, and just he won't be taking anything for granted. Right. And right up to that final stage TT, he isn't, you wouldn't say the best time trialist in the race, but. Yeah, it's not the worst climbing. But yeah, it's not the worst. No, exactly. And then moving on to Egan Bernal, who's having his first tilt at Grand Tour leadership, but we're all kind of expecting a lot already. It's an interesting one. It's a big call to put him, team leader for a Grand Tour, but he's definitely earned it. So I don't think that's the wrong decision from Sky or Ineos, as they'll be. He is young, so he's going to need to have a very stable head on his shoulders to know when to follow the likes of Roglic or Yates when they're attacking, or when to actually just wait, because that's the key thing, and you need to make sure that your team you can trust. They'll bring that back later. This is the penultimate climb. I can't go yet. I can't hold this sort of intensity right to the finish line. So, like I said, maturity will be the thing that is in question a little bit with him, but he can do it, and he's got the form, and he's a very, very exciting rider. Yeah, I mean, we saw at the Tour last year how strong he was, like supporting Froome and Thomas. It's just a different role in support, that's all. Because when it all counts on you, you have to be the person to follow. And often it's instinct. You go with the move or you don't. Yeah. And if you go with them too early, too often, that's when stage 16, 17, 18, it gets harder and harder to keep doing that. Yeah. So that's when the majority of the Froomes of this world who have won the number of consecutive Grand Tours, they are just making those decisions really well on the road all the time, and that adds up and adds up. Yeah, I think we've seen that from him in 1 week races. We saw in Paris-Nice how in the crosswinds he was there. It was him and Luke Rowe
Luke Rowe driving it. Sometimes even Bernal driving it, which was insane in itself. But yeah, to see that stretch over 3 weeks, can he keep that going mentally, physically? That is.
And the Giro, it matters in the third week. Some of the Grand Tours, it's not quite the same in the third week, like the Tour de France. Not always, but yeah, you've really got to conserve everything. Every second counts, every centimetre of road for the entire 3,500 kilometres.
Definitely. And one of the riders who is master when it comes to the third week, Vincenzo Nibali, former winner of all 3 Grand Tours, and he just, home race of course, just grows into it, and it kind of fits his style. Yeah,
we're not sure what his team will be like, so maybe he'll be someone who actively targets the final few stages, so he doesn't put too much pressure on his team. I mean, they are still strong, but he's got 1 or 2 really strong riders as opposed to the whole set, you know, of 9 guys. So yeah, I do expect him to. We know he can do the third week. We know he can do the kind of solo, you know, attacks that we saw Chris Froome do last year, and he can take it off people. And if there's any weakness, he will.
Yeah, exactly. And the people will be aware of that as well. They won't let him, you won't be seeing him without a fight anyway, just let go up the road. Even if he's got 5 minutes, they'll be like a bit cautious. They won't want to just see him disappear because you don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So another young Colombian after Egan Bernal, Miguel Angel Lopez, 3rd last year, kind of under the radar with all the drama that was going on with Froome and Yates and Dumoulin. But yeah, podium last year and
he podiumed on consistency.
Yeah.
Like, never left the front group, never got dropped, never had a bad day, but equally, he never took the race on and, like, completely smashed it. So I think consistency can get you on the podium, but it's very hard for consistency to actually win you the race, and we need to see now how he's going to put together the mountain stages and the time trials, because the time trials will matter in this. So he's still going to, I'm sure he's going to be a solid pair of hands, and if there's any drop-off anywhere, like, he'll be there to pick up the pieces and take advantage. But it'd be interesting. He's slightly more of an outsider, although, like you say, on the podium, still very strong.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with the time trials this year, with the amount of kilometres against the clock. You could struggle just to get that win, unless, obviously, this is the Giro. You don't know what's going to happen with the top tier riders, but he could slot in just below and maybe make that leap as well if he has a very good race and others.
Well, he's only young, so if he's coming to this race a little bit stronger than last year, then he's going to be formidable.
Yeah. So the next rider we want to talk about is Bob Jungels, and he's had an absolutely stellar spring, and we got our roaming reporter Gregor Brown to catch up with him and get his thoughts on the race.
Bob Jungels, you've done the Giro d'Italia twice so far. Why the decision to race the Giro in 2019?
Well, first of all, we had a good look at the parcours of the Tour of the Giro. So yeah, I think the Giro just suits me much better this year. Obviously, it came with a few sacrifices also, which are the Ardennes Classics.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to what's coming up now, and then Giro.
Yeah, being a Grand Tour rider takes a lot of planning and a lot of time in your schedule.
Absolutely. I mean, Grand Tour rider is something very special. I think it's very challenging. Maybe my physique is not the perfect one for climbing, for GC riding, but it's been really nice every time with quite good results. So I will go for it again, and I feel good over the 3 weeks, and that's why I stick to it.
Yeah. How do you manage your season with those Cobble Classic goals and the Grand Tour Giro d'Italia goal? How do you manage your training? Is that tough to do?
Yeah, of course. Training for the Flanders Classics was different than now for the Giro. Obviously, it's going to be a bit more hilly in Italy, but yeah, it's much more endurance, less short time power, and then TT work, which I didn't really need before. But yeah, currently we are training on those bases.
Yeah. Have you done more specific training or more specific planning over the winter to be ready to try to win a Grand Tour?
Yeah, well, I think with the 6th and an 8th place, I'm still.
Is that still far away from a win?
I think it's still far away from a win. In the end, it's racing, and you never know how it turns out. All I can say right now is that I'm really, really motivated. I think with the 3 time trials, it's something that I have to use as an advantage compared to pure climbers. And then I think I also grow. I'm still learning and processing. We will see how the condition will be in May.
Intriguing to hear from Bob Youngles there, who's, like I mentioned, had an absolutely fantastic spring. I mean, won Kern, Brussels Kern, was 5th in E3, 3rd in Dwars, the Vanderen. Like, you're kind of a bit like, should he be doing this? But he's shown in the past he can ride Grand Tours
in those
very
kind
well.
of classics, though, he can do what he wants. But
yeah.
Grand Tours are slightly different. I had noticed, like, he's one of my favourite riders, Bob Youngles, so I had noticed that I kind of keep an eye out for him, and he's got his Luxembourg National Champs jersey on.
Yeah.
Not quite climbing as well as maybe I would have expected, but I wonder if that's actually a purposeful thing, because while it's cold and he's doing flatter races, and he's very, very strong in his team, help setting their tactics up.
Yeah.
It's better that he's using his form like that. So whether he's been working in this kind of intermediate phase to, come into these Grand Tours now a little bit lighter, work on his climbing, and then make sure he's in absolute peak form for Grand Tour start racing. That's yet to be seen, but he definitely can do, top 10 or something.
And he could well be one of these riders who builds into the race. Like, he doesn't have to be firing first of all.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So building up into the 3rd week and making sure that he's on peak form when it matters. That's
Yeah, no, definitely. So we saw a Movistar Trident at the Tour last year, and it didn't really work out. Not gonna lie. And they claim they're only going with 2-pronged attacks this year, but they do have 3 riders lining up in the style who could well be the leaders. So they've got Mikel Landa, Alejandro Valverde, and Richard Carapaz, which Carapaz isn't the biggest name out of those 3, but he finished 4th last year. So he's no mug, to say the least.
He's another one like Miguel Angel Lopez, really strong, good climber.
Yeah.
Didn't drop any balls, but equally didn't set anything alight either. He was quite often on the wheel when someone was going, rather than being that person. But, you can't count them out. So I was just looking at the names. I genuinely haven't really seen Mikel Landa at all this season.
No.
Like, I haven't even picked him out. So either he's been totally under the radar on purpose, or he's just not where he needs to be. But I guess if he's still one of the 2 who was coming into this race as a favourite for that team, they're a strong team, then he must be going well. And actually, he must have been keeping his head down. This is my assumption, that he's been keeping his head down on purpose, and actually he's going to unleash, really quality, form and attacking form to go into this year's Giro.
Definitely. I mean, I should have mentioned at the top, this feels absolutely loaded. Like, this is probably more competitive than the Tour de France itself. And the final person that I highlighted, there may be a complete wild card that we don't know of yet, but Michael Woods made his mark at the Worlds last year, got onto the podium, and it'd be interesting to see how he gets on with a full GC campaign as well.
We could easily see him on the podium.
Yeah.
I think to win it is a difficult one.
Yeah.
But he could get on the podium, and he's definitely got the climbing ability to be right at the front with the absolute best. It's going to make such an exciting race. He might come away with a stage victory, something like that. Be fantastic to watch. I can't wait.
Definitely. And as mentioned in the stage preview there's it's very front loaded for the sprinters, but there's plenty of sprinters to watch. So we've got 3 big guys who probably pull out before stage 13 and won't be fighting for the sprinters jersey unless they're feeling particularly good. But the main one we have to mention is home rider Elia Viviani.
Yeah, I mean, he's been winning already this year. There's a lot of good sprinters at the moment, and there's also been a few sprinters changing teams.
Yeah.
So then you start looking at the lead-outs and who's building the lead-out for the sprinters really well, because that obviously matters. Viviani, he's a quality sprinter on his home Grand Tour. He's going to want to win a couple of stages, definitely. And who would bet against him? Gaviria, if you don't mind me going straight into him, he's changed teams. And I thought it was interesting, actually. He's done better than I thought. I think, one, he's a little bit stronger. But secondly, I think UAE team, having someone as good as him, has galvanised the team, and actually they've delivered better lead-outs than I've seen in the previous years, because they know they've got someone who can finish it off, and I think that's a really exciting position to be in. So actually more potential for him than you maybe would have thought when you say, oh, Gaviria's going to the UAE, how's that going to work for his lead-out? Well, to me, I think they've put that question mark aside and gone, this is how it works, and they've delivered it really well.
No, exactly. And another rider who's moved to a new team for this season is Caleb Ewan, and that will be just as interesting to see a Grand Tour lead-out, because we've kind of had little snippets of it, but you don't send someone to the Giro not to win stages. They're going to be going for it, and he's going to be on a prime lead-out train.
Absolutely. Making his mark, Caleb Ewan, in a slightly different way to most sprinters. He is going for the really hard stages. So we saw up Hatterdam, where he's winning a stage, and that is, you know, 12, 14% for the last sort of 300 metres. And then he did another one, I can't remember what the race was, but again, a really tough finish, gnarly climbing to the line and actually time gaps to second, third and fourth. So he's definitely started to eke out a little bit of a kind of recognition of an ability to do sort of bunch gallops like Alejandro Verde would have done in the past, even though he's doing them slightly differently. So I think that's quite interesting and probably will suit him, because we know this, you know, Giro is very, very tough, and a lot of the run-ins have got, while they're not massive climbs on the profile, they're still hard.
Yes.
So maybe he'll get over them a little bit less fatigued than the others and have more to go with into that last couple hundred metres.
No, for sure, for sure. I think out of those three, if you're going to see one of them in Verona at the finish, it would be Viviani, both because he's on home roads, and also because Gaviria and Ewan are targeting the Tour as well later this year, so they don't want to. There's no point in them slogging through the mountains.
It might be hard work slogging through the mountains, but a points jersey at the end of a Grand Tour is a big,
of course,
you know, victory, and goes on the Palmares.
It sure does. It sure does. We've gone through the stages. We've gone through the main favourites, but now it's time to put our reputations on the line and make our predictions. Well, mine took a severe dent last year because for the Tour de France, I predicted Nairo Quintana to win, and
that was a long shot. I could have told you that at the time.
We all know how that went. So this year I am going to go for Primoz Roglic to take the win. Like we mentioned earlier, I just think he looks super strong this year. He's got a super strong team, and I think the time trial and kilometres are really going to play into his favour, to have that in the bank, not having to push it on some climbs he can follow. Like it's going to be, I think it will be him and Dumoulin, but I think he will be one of the key riders, and I think this is gonna be where he makes that leap and becomes a Grand Tour winner for the first time. How about yourself?
Well, I think Tom Dumoulin's going to win. I think combination of time trialling kilometres, there's quite a few in this Grand Tour, and the fact that he has won a Grand Tour before, he just shows he can do it. It's such a difficult thing to join together 3 weeks all up and get it right and finish out on top, and there's going to be, you know, obviously a bunch of guys who are clearly talented all the way down our list, who are riders who can be in a front group, but they're probably unlikely to actually win at the end of the third week. So, Tom Dumoulin is my man.
Oh, that's fair, that's fair. So it's not just us who've made their predictions. We caught up with last year's winner, Chris Froome, to see who he thought would take home the pink jersey this year.
There's a really strong field going to the Giro d'Italia. I think Tom Dumoulin, Roglic.
Simon Yates is back.
Simon Yates. It's tough. I'd say Roglic would be my choice.
On Roglic. Okay.
But obviously, I'd love to see Ewan cross that line first.
How possible is that? Is he capable of pulling off a win in his first crack at a Grand Tour, where he's going in as a leader?
I mean, anything's possible. It's going to be, a lot of responsibility for him. He's young, but he's very mature, and I believe he could do it. It wouldn't completely surprise me if he did pull it off.
Well. Chris Froome agrees with me.
What does he know?
I think he is very much favouring Egan Bernal as well. But I think it's going to be tough to call between any of those big riders. And Primoz Roglic, Dumoulin, Bernal, Yates. Take your pick, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And none of us have taken any consideration of risk of crashes and mechanicals in the first week, where there's technically a sprint sort of finish that could equally shape the race as much as anything.
No, exactly. Well, all there is to do now is wait and see what happens and look forward to it all kicking off. But thank you again, Yanto.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and do let us know your predictions for the Giro d'Italia, both for the overall win, stage wins and the Sprinters jersey in the comment section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Cycling Weekly channel. But until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you then.